Well, thank you for being with us. Peta is with me. I'm Alan Jones, and to use a Bill Hayden expression, everyone, including, and I think most probably everyone, including those people in the Liberal Party, including Malcolm Turnbull, simply doesn't seem to cut the mustard. I think that's the sentiment that's being expressed. And quite frankly, I think, as I've said many times, Malcolm Turnbull couldn't really lead a horse to water, and there are real questions over his leadership. Well, now there is another massive test of the leadership is looming for Malcolm Turnbull, and if the form guide is anything to go by, you wouldn't back him to get it right with stolen money. Now, the result of the postal vote on this same-sex marriage comes out tomorrow at 10 o'clock, and all hell will most probably break loose then. Assuming it's a yes vote, legislation will have to go to the Parliament to change the Marriage Act. Malcolm Turnbull has promised that that will happen before Christmas. But as I've said regularly, how you can present legislation to an illegally constituted Parliament, I don't know. The bill to change the Marriage Act has been sponsored by West Australian Liberal Senator Dean Smith, but it offers only limited protection, if any, to other critical freedoms. And even advocates of same-sex marriage argue that the change to the Marriage Act should not confer a freedom on them to marry, yet deny basic freedoms to others. Now, I voted yes in the postal vote, but if there is a move to not guarantee other freedoms, for example, religious freedom, freedom of conscience, the freedom of people to lead their lives according to their own beliefs, if they aren't guaranteed those freedoms, then all hell will break loose. The bill that Malcolm Turnbull seems to be lining up to support, sponsored by the West Australian Liberal Dean Smith, offers only limited protection for essential freedoms. So indeed, Senator Smith seems to be suggesting that religious freedom is something that, oh, well, it could be addressed down the track. That is plainly rubbish and unacceptable to a large tract of the Australian electorate. Now, if the Prime Minister doesn't understand that, I have to say, he has to understand that his leadership is in big trouble. Now, enter a young man from Victoria, a Liberal Senator, James Patterson. He's smart and he's in touch. There are stacks of young people who voted yes to same-sex marriage and share the view of James Patterson that other freedoms must not be eroded. Now, yesterday, Senator James Patterson released a draft bill to legalise same-sex marriage in Australia while preserving the freedoms of all Australians. He voted yes in the same-sex postal vote, and he's argued for same-sex marriage since way back in 2011. And he said, "I've never believed that allowing same-sex couples to marry needs to come at the expense of the freedoms of other Australians. I've always argued," he said, "that Parliament is capable of ensuring that there are no negative consequences for anyone else from allowing gay Australians to marry." So he's released this draft bill that achieves two important objectives. It validates same-sex marriage and protects a raft of other freedoms. The bill, sponsored by the West Australian Liberal Senator Dean Smith, does none of this. It changes the Marriage Act to provide for same-sex marriage, but virtually says, oh, well, we'll worry about the other stuff later. Well, the Prime Minister now has a real dilemma. Does he back the West Australian bill of Dean Smith, as he seemed to be saying he would from the Philippines today, or does he get back James Patterson's bill? Now, at a time when people despair of what is thrown up to us as political representation, Senator James Patterson, Victoria, who'll be 30 next week, gives us all hope. And he's kicked the ball right into the court of Malcolm Turnbull and Bill Shorten, reminding his own Prime Minister that on September 15, the Prime Minister said, "I just want to reassure Australians that as strongly as I believe in the right of same-sex couples to marry, even more strongly, if you like, do I believe in religious freedom." On the same day, the opposition leader argued, "I'm a supporter of marriage equality, but I've also been raised to be a person of faith. I can give this guarantee to the Australian people. I and the Labor Party will not support legislation which impinges upon religious freedom in this country." So therefore, acceptance of the James Patterson bill should be plain sailing. But there are plenty of jellybacks in the Parliament. Senator James Patterson, at 29 years of age, joins us from Canberra. James, good evening to you. So let me ask you firstly...
Alan, how are you? G'day, Peter.
Well done. Where are you as we speak on this bill that you have introduced?
Well, Alan, my objective from the outset was to ensure that by the end of this process, if there is a yes result tomorrow in the postal survey, that we legalise same-sex marriage with strong protections for religious freedom, freedom of speech and freedom of conscience. So I'm working right now on this task. I put up a private member's bill which achieves that, and I'm talking to my colleagues about the best path forward to ensuring those protections in my bill find their way into the law.
You have said, to your great credit, I believe, religious freedom is a universal human right. You said there is no international law or legal instrument that says only ministers of religion enjoy this right and deserve to have it protected. You said, so that religious freedom extends to the congregation as well. And you say, it doesn't end at the church, the mosque or the synagogue door. There is nothing in legislation that Dean Smith is presenting that guarantees what you say ought to be guaranteed.
That's right, Alan. I mean, I think there are some strengths of Dean Smith's bill, but they don't go sufficiently far for my liking. Another way of putting it is that if a priest should have protection, then his congregants should have protection too. Just because you sit in the pew instead of standing up the front doesn't mean you don't have religious liberty and it shouldn't be protected. How
good's this bloke, Peter? He said, we uphold the idea of religious freedom because we believe people of faith deserve to be able to lead their lives according to their values. Can't argue with
look, and I agree with you. I understand that point, and I make the point also. I'm Catholic. It doesn't matter what you feel about divorce, and divorce is available in Australian law. If you're married in the Catholic Church, the Church won't marry you if you are a divorced Catholic. Now, I have no issue with that. There's a church law, and then there is the common law or the state law. I accept the two. But I guess, James, my issue would be I don't see that you have much support with the senior ranks of the Cabinet, but for a few Conservatives, and I have to say they've been quite silent, some of those senior Conservatives throughout the debate about same-sex marriage. But I don't see that you've got many of the senior Cabinet members. I know this is not a debate along party lines. I know it will be dealt with as a free vote. I understand that. But the Prime Minister gave assurances, I think, to anyone who perhaps was sitting on the fence during the same-sex marriage survey about the issue of religious freedom. Those comments he made, and I know Alan went through them with a direct quote there before, but they're the essence of, I believe, more strongly, in fact, about the right to religious freedom than I do about the right for people of all sexualities to marry. He promised he would look after religious freedoms. Now, I saw his footage out of the Philippines today. He basically said it's the Dean Smith bill or nothing. It's the Dean Smith bill or nothing. What are you guys going to do? What is the party room going to do? What are people that think like you in the coalition going to do, Senator Patterson, to hold him to his promise?
Well, Peter, I'm not quite as pessimistic as you are, and I'm certainly not giving up the fight yet by any stretch. I've been really encouraged by the support that I've got since I put my bill out from my coalition colleagues, but also from the crossbench, and even, believe it or not, there are some members of the Labor Party who want to ensure that there are really robust protections for all of our freedoms. So this has got a long way to run yet.
But you're going to have to do it via amendment, because as I understand it, should the decision come down tomorrow at 10 a.m. to say that the yes vote has carried, and I suspect that's probably the likely result, they are going to move on in the Senate, the Dean Smith bill, immediately and start debating the Dean Smith bill. So the Senator Patterson bill will not get a look in. So you're going to have to move amendments to the Dean Smith bill. Do you accept that that's the reality?
Well, Peter, I'm not proprietorial about my name being on the bill or even the exact wording of my bill. What I care about is the endpoint that we reach. And however we get to that endpoint, it has to be an endpoint that has legalises same-sex marriage if there's a yes vote, and that has those robust protections
James,
for freedom.
James, I get the point, but we've spent now 3 days talking about a James Patterson bill that I said on Monday night won't see the light of day because of the stitch-up between the moderates behind Dean Smith and the Labor Party and the Greens and the crossbenchers that support.
But if that's the case, there'll be a massive political fallout within another split within the Turnbull government. His leadership will be even more turmoil than it is now if he doesn't give consideration to what James is saying. Because I just want to raise a question here, which I'm sure viewers are concerned about to be specific, you have said it is necessary to extend the same principle applied to other same-sex marriage bills beyond ministers of religion to anyone directly connected to a wedding. And you've said if it's wrong to force a priest to participate in a same-sex wedding against his belief, it should be wrong to force a florist or a photographer. Now, you can call it whatever you like, but what Dean Smith is about offers no protection to the florist or the photographer. James, am I right or wrong?
That is right, Alan, and there's a really sad case from the United States on this very issue where a florist happily served a gay couple as customers for 9 years, and when the law changed in their home state of Washington State and they sought to get married, they asked her to provide flowers for their wedding, as you would. She explained to them that she didn't want to do so because she had a sincere religious belief in marriage in the traditional sense, and she couldn't breach that sincere belief by participating in their wedding. Now, unfortunately, their response to that was to sue her through the courts. She was fined thousands of dollars, and that case is still working its way through the legal system. It's on its way to the Supreme Court in the United States. I think that's a terribly sad thing. I mean, legalising same-sex marriage should be a really positive moment for Australia, but I worry that it won't be if we get caught up in all these acrimonious court cases, and that's what I'm trying to stop.
So coming to your bill and Dean Smith's bill, could a printing company refuse to print a book arguing against same-sex marriage?
They could, and that's not just a theoretical example, Alan, because it happened not that long ago. A conservative advocate of traditional marriage sought to have his book published by a book publisher, and they said, no, we don't publish books with those sorts of views. Now, I think in a free society, they should be free to do that. They shouldn't be forced to publish something they disagree with.
So why is it taking you so long to get your bill out? Because, I'll say it again, I think that it's all over by the shouting, that it will be the Dean Smith bill. You'll get to amend it, let's say, if you get the numbers in the chamber, either chamber, but it won't be your bill. Why is it taking the conservative argument, I guess, about religious protections? I accept that you support same-sex marriage, but why has it taken so long, Senator Patterson, to actually get a bill put together? We've been talking about this issue for many months. It's now right down to the wire, and this is the first we've seen of your proposed changes.
Well, Peter, it's a fair question, and the truth is it just takes a really long time. It's a really technical area. It's a really complex thing. We had some limited assistance within the limited time and resources available from the Office of Parliamentary Counsel, and we used some external lawyers who were very generous with their time. But even with them working full out on this for months, it is a really technical area and it does take a long time. So we don't have the resources of government at our disposal. We don't have government departments. This is a private members' bill process.
No.
James, just before... Sorry, Peter. Just before we finish here, on this issue of these safe schools, this educational rubbish that's being introduced into schools, particularly in Victoria, what about the protection of parents, for example, and this Safe Schools program? So, under your bill, I understand that parents have a right to pull their children out of classes that conflict with their values. Under the Dean Smith bill, those parents have no protection.
That's right, Alan, and this is a really important issue because right now in Australia, if you are, say you're an atheist parent and your child attends a public school and they offer religious instruction classes, well, you have a right to remove your child from that class because it's inconsistent with your values, and I think you should. What it is not clear is whether or not you have a right to take your kid out of school class that's teaching something like safe schools, which is inconsistent with your belief in traditional marriage. So what this amendment tries to do is ensure that parents have that equal right, whether they want to take the kid out of a religious instruction class or a sexuality and gender instruction class, they should have that same right because it goes to the values of the parents.
Good on you.
So just on that last issue, James, can I say if you lose the fight attaching that measure to the same-sex marriage legislation, I think it's incredibly important that that's pursued through broader discrimination bills that might come before the Parliament, or certainly even educational funding, which the Commonwealth provides to the states, because I just think there's going to be a lot of difficulty with the cakes and the florists and all those things as people go through on this bill. But I think something as fundamental of what your own children are taught in schools that you fund as a taxpayer must be pursued by the coalition if it's serious about taking the fight up to Labor at the next election.
The issue, just winding this up, and James I know agrees with this, there are stacks and stacks of people who are advocates of same-sex marriage who argued that they should have extended to them the freedom to marry whom they want and they do not believe that freedom should come at the expense of the denial of freedom to others. So I just don't know where Dean Smith or Malcolm Turnbull are getting off to. But James, thank you for talking to us. We will talk again, and good luck. I really commend your youth and your scholarship and your energy and your commitment to certain values. It's to your great credit.
That's very kind.
Senator James Patterson, Victoria.